Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Kubeir. I'm a CICC licensed immigration consultant, and we are back to doing our weekly roundups. Not a Saturday today, but considering that I was enjoying my time in the beautiful city of Halifax during the National Citizenship and Immigration Conference (NCIC) for 2024, which was organized by our Consultants Association, KPIC. Lots of learning, lots of understanding of new things, lots of meeting new people, interesting people, lots of networking, lots of making new friends. But overall, I come back a little bit more enlightened with about certain things, and that's what I'm looking forward to. But for you guys out there, let's talk about what matters to you in terms of the Canadian immigration, because you guys are not interested in all that. But if you were ever looking to take a short vacation to Halifax, I absolutely recommend it. Not only to Halifax, you should also take a trip down to Moncton and then obviously go to Prince Edward Islands as well. Those four Atlantic provinces, incredible, absolutely a must go on and should be on your bucket list for sure. Starting with today's weekly roundup. First of all, please do not do any super chats. I have very limited time today, so I will not be able to answer a lot of questions. So please. So don't do any super chats. It would not be, fair for me to not answer those questions, but you would have paid for them. So I would not. I would really like you not to do that today. Thank you so much. And so as far as what's happening this week is concerned, well, there were a few draws here and there. Of course, we already know that. And then the big announcement was made about the Bill C-71. This has to do with the lost Canadians. I will talk to you about that in a bit because a lot of people are confused. What's lost Canadians? But the bigger one was about the undocumented workers, and that as soon as a week, the Cabinet of Canada will be talking about it and trying to regularize a pathways or offer a pathway for the undocumented workers in Canada. That obviously is triggering a lot of emotions. So we'll talk about that. Also, a couple of things that I managed to pick up in candid conversations with the IRCC officials. I will share with you that. But very quickly, let's start with our weekly roundup so we are up to date as to what's happening in the world of Canadian immigration. Of course, please, by all means, do subscribe to the channel. Come back and follow us if TikTok is your flavor, or Instagram, or Facebook, or Twitter, wherever that might be. Starting with the PNP draws, British Columbia had a PNP draw on the 14th of May as well as on the 22nd of May. They have been quite regular with their draws. However, the number of invitations has gone down. And because the number of invitations has gone down, therefore, obviously, as you can imagine, the scores have really gone up. Can you imagine seeing a score of 131, right? That has been the bothersome or the issue. But I guess BC know what they're doing, because what they've done is they've also spread out now their invitations in the different in the different categories. So they're inviting separately under the childcare categories. They're inviting separately under the construction professions. They're inviting separately for the healthcare professions, separately for the veterinary care professions, and then you have the express entry BCPNP, and then the semi-skilled BCPNP, and the entry-level BCPNP, and then you have the international graduate. So when you have got so many streams, you obviously still need to balance out the number of invitations, and therefore the collective numbers in each category has gone down. But then there are so many other categories as well. But again, as you can see the impact. The score was 90 for the childcare, 93 for construction, 100 for healthcare. But just a little while back, just a few months back, you could have seen the scores at only 60. So this was something which we found was interesting there. What else have we got? We had Manitoba. Yes, 23rd of May, Manitoba held another draw. They're continuing to hold the draws, thankfully, regularly, unlike certain other provinces who we may not name. But yes, of course, Saskatchewan has not been conducting their draws that regularly. But Manitoba has been pretty much there. They invited 121 candidates with a minimum score of 782. Again, the number of invitations have remained a bit low, and therefore the scores continue to be high. 782, trust me, is a bit of a high score there. The Manitoba also held a draw under the skilled worker overseas as well, and of course skilled workers in Manitoba. And when they issued a 39, well, they did issue 39 invitations with a minimum score of 688. 688 is not bad. I think there was something, if their profiles had indicated that there was a strategic recruitment initiative. So not everybody, but only the candidates with the strategic recruitment initiative were invited for this particular draw. Therefore, the score was only at 688. Otherwise, I was wondering how come the score was so low. In other news, and of course, there is some of that as well, IRCC is now accepting community applications for the two new pilot programs. So the two new pilot programs, first one is the rural community immigration pilot and the francophone community immigration pilot. Both of these has French or francophone skill factors. As of right now, what they're doing is they're inviting the communities or the smaller municipalities who are interested in participating in this program. Of course, they would have a certain amount of criteria, and as long as the municipalities or the communities are able to become eligible under those criteria, they would then form part of these programs. Of course, please note that they will continue to be employer specific. I know there are a lot of TikTok and Instagram reels that I've seen where it says, oh, new programs, and everybody will become PR. Not going to happen. These will also be employer specific. Another one, of course, this one is what I was talking about, the lost Canadians. Now, this is the new legislation that has been tabled. This is a new bill C-71. Let's see if I have it open over here. Yes, I have it open over here as well. Let's get rid of this. Yeah. So this excuse me. So what is the lost Canadian concept, or what is this bill C-71 all about? Let's talk a little bit about that before we jump onto this. So technically, the way Canadian citizenship works is, of course, for most people who want to be naturalized, you first need to be coming to Canada as a permanent resident. You live in Canada for, as of right now, 3 years or 1,095 days, and then you are eligible for the citizenship. Of course, you obviously have no criminal convictions or records there, and nothing of that sort happening in your profile. And if you've been a good boy or a good girl or otherwise, then you obviously are eligible. And you will go through a citizenship test. The test basically includes the Canadian history and how Canada has come up to where it is today. Talks about the other the indigenous communities as well, and therefore that's how you pass the exam. You become a citizen. Now, if you were a Canadian citizen, you were born in Canada, you were a Canadian citizen, you were naturalized and you became a Canadian citizen, and then you went outside Canada, you had a baby there. Now that baby, by the fact that it's your first generation after you became a Canadian citizen, has the right to also apply for citizenship directly. Even if you adopt a child, the child has the right to apply for citizenship directly. Now, this is the first generation. Now, this was limited to first generation. So what happens is that you are a Canadian citizen, you went outside Canada, you had a baby, and then once you had the baby became a Canadian citizen. And then once that baby grew up, because the baby is now a big boy, girl, whatever, and they are also Canadian citizen. And now they go outside Canada and have a child. Now that child is not eligible to apply for citizenship directly. That is the second generation rule that Canada has all this while. Now in December, the Ontario court, I think the Ontario court ruled that this is unlawful, this is unconstitutional, and this should be changed. There should be no second generation limit. And therefore, and they were given 6 months to complete this, or rather to sort this out. Therefore, the Bill C-91, I keep saying, Bill C-71 has now been tabled. And in this Bill C-71, what they're talking about is, let's see. As a result, first generation limit, Canadian citizens who were born outside Canada cannot pass on their citizenship to the children also born outside Canada. And that was the issue. Therefore, on December 19, the Ontario Superior Court of Justice has declared this as unconstitutional. And therefore, this new bill is being tabled. Hopefully, this should go through pretty quickly and get the royal assent. And what this Bill C-71 is about is that it would allow a Canadian parent who was born abroad. So if you are a Canadian citizen, you became naturalized, you're born in Canada, then you had a child outside Canada, that child grew up and obviously is a Canadian, and then that child also has a child outside Canada, but has a substantial connection to Canada, which basically means that they would have at least been in Canada for at least 1,095 days, then that second generation limit will be removed and their children will also be eligible to become Canadian citizens. So this by and large is the context of Bill C-71. And not only that, this will retroactively will restore citizenship to any remaining lost Canadians and their descendants, to anyone who was born abroad to a Canadian parent in the second or subsequent generation before the legislation comes into force. So once this new Bill C-71 comes into force, so anybody before this legislation is passed, before that, if anybody was impacted, or if they had their descendants or their children who were born abroad and they were not able to become citizens, then those will also have an eligibility to apply for citizenship under this Bill C-71. So this is that lost Canadian concept that we are talking about. And yeah, it's a good one overall, but a lot of people are seeing this as the ploy by the Liberals to get more Canadian citizens into the fold so that they can get better votes. But I don't think that's the case. In this particular one, the actual issue has to do with the fact that on 19th of December, the Ontario Superior Court had already passed a ruling. This had to do with the court law. This had to be with the judgment from the court and not from what the politics is all about. So yeah, people talk about what they want to talk about, but this has to do with the constitutional impact or aspect as far as the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, who passed the judgment on this. And this is the reason why we are seeing this particular Bill C-71 being tabled. Okay, what else have we got? Okay, Canada to help individuals impacted by the ongoing crisis in Haiti. As normal, as usual, Canada is always at the forefront of humanitarian gestures across the world. As and when there has been any issue, situation, circumstances across the world in different countries, Canada has always stepped up and has offered in some way or the other, through ways of policies, through way of temporary residence programs, some sort of relief for the family members of the Canadian citizens or permanent residents who might be impacted in those countries. So this new one from Haiti is another one on that aspect. The future of temporary residence workers in Canada. Will inland draws resume, or will domestic draws resume? Now, this was, let me see if I have any more slides here. I don't think so. This should be pretty much it. Yeah. So this one, let's talk about this one. So this is in reference to the domestic draws. I know a lot of you have been holding your breath for that one, because ever since Mark Miller in one of his conference advisories indicated that domestic draws made sense. Yes, they are logical, they make sense, and they were looking to include or rather consider more domestic draws, because that would be the best way of bringing into balance the high number of temporary residents and very small quota of permanent residents. For people who do not know, there are nearly 3 million people right now who are temporary residents in Canada, not taking into account the undocumented workers, the people who are here on visit visas. Those are not taken into account. So you still have nearly 3 million people in Canada right now who are skilled workers, closed open work permit holders, spouse work permit holders, international students, of course, refugee claimants. So all of these form that temporary resident number of 3 million. And yes, because that number is quite big, there is always this discussion as to what will happen, because most of these people who are here, about 3 million, they are not here for a picnic, right? They are looking for some pathways to regularize their status, to become permanent residents. And the quotas of permanent residents per year are only limited to 500,000 at this point of time. And in the foreseeable future, I don't see that number going up at any point of time, at least for the next few years. So how do you bring a balance to this? Mark Miller, in one of the advisories, in one of the conferences, had indicated that domestic draw makes sense. We've been saying that. I mean, I'm not sure why that light bulb went on so late. Wouldn't that be the first thing you would look at? I mean, look at it, what they did during the pandemic, right? They looked at the inside Canada applicants, the Tier 2 PR, which was a horrible program, in my opinion, but that came into play. Then they had the ridiculous draw of 75 CRS score, also a bad move, but fair enough. I mean, they did what they had to do. But those things were done. And of course, then there was also, for the first time, they started conducting, not the first time, actually, they had that in 2016 when the Express Entry was just launched. They had it then as well. So they started conducting the CEC specific draws. Now, with the CEC specific draws, we saw that a lot of Canadian experience class candidates, people who have work experience in Canada of at least 1 year within the last 3 years and are eligible NOC and are paid, those are eligible as Canadian experience class, and they saw a lower CRS score being drawn out in the Express Entry, and a lot of people were able to take advantage. However, those CEC specific draws stopped in the month of September in 2021, right? 2021, yes. And then, of course, there was this long gap. There was this long gap of draws completely. There was no draws. And when the draws did resume, then the scores really shot up. And the scores continue to be quite high as of right now. With this situation happening, domestic draws makes sense even in the current scenario. Right now, the scores are 500 plus. While there is a lot of hue and talk about that the number of people above 500 are largely people who have LMIAs, who have bought LMIAs, who whatever. I don't want to get into that discussion at this point of time, but that's not entirely true. The scores above 500 largely constitute of candidates who actually are Canadian experience class, who actually possibly have a master's degree or a couple of, even a diploma for that matter. They are at the age of 29 below, technically have a CLB 9, not even CLB 10. Even if they have CLB 10, even better, but CLB 9, 1 year of work experience in Canada, 1 year of work experience outside Canada, and bang, they can be easily above 510, 515 without any much problem there. And why would people not accept or believe that there can be a large number of people who are passing out of universities with a master's degree and become eligible with CECs with a high score? But therefore, domestic draws is definitely the need of the hour. At least the opinion is quite strong there. And this was just a backgrounder on all these domestic draws issues. So therefore, in one of the conferences, Mark Miller dropped a soundbite which said that domestic draws is something which they're considering. Now, after that, we haven't heard anything about domestic draws. There was nothing as to what do they mean by domestic draws. Is the CEC draws, or is there something else? When they're saying domestic, what are they referring to? So what happened is that during our recent conference in Halifax of immigration consultants, I did meet with the IRCC's Senior Director of Policies, Josh, I think that was the name. And I also posted that on Twitter if you haven't really seen that. And in a very candid manner, in a very candid discussion, he did state very clearly, and I'm sure there were plenty of witnesses who were also along with me when we were talking and having this discussion, that the domestic draws were indeed CEC draws. That is what the reference was towards the CEC draws. And yes, the CEC draws are being considered as a very, very strong option, and they are definitely on the horizon. Now, obviously, whenever you're speaking to anybody from IRCC, they don't usually give out much information because obviously they are not in that position to offer those kind of timelines or schedules or when the draws will happen or why the draws are not happening. They will never give you this kind of information. I've been going through these conferences for almost 4 or 5 years now. Never has any IRCC official ever in a very clear way or a clear term stated something which will give you an insight. So it's always in assumption or assumptuous manners, and it's always a vague, no specifics were ever provided. But in this case, the only thing he very clearly said is that yes, CEC draws are definitely being considered. Again, when they use the word considered, they're always saying that no, this is not definite, but they're being considered, and they can always backtrack on that. But this I don't think that was how they were being portrayed as. But what also I can infer, again, not stated, I can assume or I can infer that while CEC draws or while domestic draws in the form of Canadian experience class draws in Express Entry is a absolute distinct possibility, it could also be connected to some riders. Now, when I'm saying riders, I mean it could it could be a category specific CEC draw. And again, this is nothing new. We've spoken about this. If you've been watching my live streams, you know we speak about all these things. And I think almost more than a year back, I said the same thing, that CEC draws with a category connected to it is a more certain aspect of express entry that I can speculate about. But at this point of time, the only thing we got to learn was that the CEC draws is a definite consideration, and you never know when that might drop. As far as the second thing about why the draws are not happening, and I know a lot of you are already thinking we are already a month we're crossing a month now that the draws haven't happened. 4 weeks passed. Nothing specific again was indicated, though we tried to probe that question one too many times. In a very collective discussion that IRCC had as they were giving their presentation, they said that they would continue to monitor the number of ITAs that they issue and the draws that they conduct throughout the year on the basis of their operational capacity, so that they can balance out how many invitations are going out, what is their operational capacity, and how many staff that they have who can process their application, so that they can maintain their 6-month standard processing timeline. While it was said the way it was said, I don't necessarily agree with the fact that the current draw is not happening or did not happen because they wanted to maintain their operational capacity or they're trying to balance out. I don't think so. The reason for that is, and the reason why I'm saying that is, first of all, we haven't seen too many draws. It's not like that they've been conducting 27,000 invitations like they did in 2021. Nothing of that sort has happened, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, the general category draws have been tepid, right? They have been like ridiculously low, small numbers, 1,400, 1,500, 2,000, 1,800, those kind of small numbers of draws. And through the ATIP notes that we received last year, which we have seen last year, it was already indicated that IRCC is overstaffed in express entry section. So they had more than 60% staff extra in the express entry for the processing, which they obviously had hired at the time when there were serious or severe backlogs. So this doesn't add up, at least not the way I am looking at it. I don't think the draws did not happen because they were trying to maintain their operational capacities or trying to create a balance. So I'm not convinced, but I didn't have any other answer. I didn't get any other answer either. So this was what came out from the this week's conference in Halifax. Those two aspects of express entry. And as far as the protests are concerned, now let's talk about what's happening with the talk of the protests. Do you agree with what's going on as far as Prince Edward Islands is concerned? Now, it's been spoken plenty of times that it happened in British Columbia. I think that's where the protests, and when I'm talking about protests, I'm talking about postgraduate work permit holders whose work permits are expiring, and they are now expressing their they're expressing their disbelief in the fact that IRCC or Canada is not doing anything to extend their work permits. But then postgraduate work permits were never supposed to be extended. That was always a given. They only did that during COVID. They only did that as a factor of measure, and also very clearly indicated in so many times that and they've said that they had to meet the labor market demands, and that's the reason they extended the work permit. Well, at this point of time, the amount of unemployment is going up, the housing crisis is on the rise, the general public sentiment is against or is anti-immigration. Under the current circumstances, under the current political scenario, at least I don't see anything of that sort happening. Same thing, there is a lot of reels and Instagram, all these videos that you keep seeing where I've seen people, and sometimes agents, consultants, lawyers, whoever they might be, talking about PR to PR coming back again because Mark Miller said domestic draws. Again, I do not know where you are getting this from, but PR to PR is definitely not coming back. I hate to break that to you. And the reason for that is PR to PR happened specifically during COVID, and that was only because they had to complete their targets for the immigration quotas. They just couldn't get people to travel from outside Canada to come into Canada. It was not going to happen. And therefore, those Two distinct measures were taken. One was the 27,000 invitations issued for CECs with a score of 75, haha, and then the TR to PR program where they invited nearly 100,000 people under those two categories. There is absolutely no reason at this point of time for Canada or for IRCC to conduct that kind of a draw again. So while I always say that, I mean, I'm forever hopeful, yes, and being hopeful is absolutely it gives you that positive feeling, it gives you something to work towards. But pinning your hopes on these misinformed reels on Instagram or these misinformed propaganda that a lot of people try to, some people are even accepting applications, can you imagine, and saying we have limited number of spots remaining. So please do not fall into this kind of misinformation. There is no TR to PR happening. On the contrary, they have no reason to conduct. There are so many people who are waiting. Why would they conduct TR to PR? There are already, there are so many ways that have already been established for them to, go through that way. On the contrary, last year, Sean Fraser had very clearly said in no minced words that there isn't going to be any more TR to PR programs. Yes, when we talk about TR to PR, it is spoken in a generic term. It is not spoken in the sense that it's a program. It's spoken that yes, temporary residents need to be made permanent residents because we have more than about 3 million people in Canada who are temporary residents. But they are not referring to TR to PR program just the way it happened a couple of years back. So that is not what the context is about. Similarly, all these protests that the students or the workers are undergoing, right? It happened in British Columbia, and then it happened in Manitoba. In Manitoba, what they were protesting about is that they had already submitted their applications for nomination, but because of the backlogs, their work permits were expiring, and then they were tough out of luck. And the Manitoba processing times have actually gone up to almost 8, 9, 10 months, and that is what the whole expression of their discontent was about. And the immigration minister of Manitoba took that up with the immigration minister of Canada, Mark Miller, and 6,700 have been given as the number that would be approved. No details have come up yet. We don't know who are going to be able to apply or who will be able to get this approval. And at the same point of time, as far as Prince Edward Island protests are concerned, now in Prince Edward Islands, what had happened is that Prince Edward Islands is a very small province, and ever since all these conditions that you are not going to be able to get your PR that easily, or the PNP pathways were becoming difficult, express entry scores were high, a lot of people from Ontario and otherwise have moved to Prince Edward Islands because it was an understanding that getting your PNP processed through PEI, Prince Edward Islands, is fairly easy. And then Prince Edward Islands has made some changes. When they made the changes, first of all, they have also reduced their immigration quotas by 25% nearly. And then they have also restricted certain occupations from applying for the nomination because there are just too many of them. How many nominations do you think the province can issue? They can't. They have a limit. They do not have an endless supply. So now if you're going to protest on the streets, and then you are going to threaten them with hunger strike and all that, I'm not sure what kind of an impact that's going to have, or if that's going to help you, or how does that bear on the reputation or the how is the entire community of the students then seen by the other Canadians, other permanent residents in Canada? So maybe a bit of a balance there is required. I mean, of course, protests is absolutely an acceptable format in democracy, and we are a free speech country, and therefore, peaceful protests are never an issue. But what you're demanding versus what can be made possible, that needs to be taken into context. And as long as you are aware of that, I think that's the way to go. But that's my 2 bits as far as the protests aspect is concerned. That's pretty much it as far as the presentation for today is concerned. Connect with us on the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, of course. And we are all over the place. And one last factor. Guys, please don't do super chats. I will not be able to answer your questions. So please do not do super chats. I've been saying that from the beginning. I will not be able to take those questions. I have only 10 more minutes because I need to hop on to my consultations after that. You are more than welcome to book a consultation if that's what you are looking to do. By all means, that's the link. Jump onto it. We can have a one-on-one discussion and answer your questions in person. But as of right now, today's session, I will not be able to answer questions at all. I might take a couple of them, but that also depending on how much time I have at hand for the last topic of today's discussion, and that has to do with where did it go? This one. IRCC or Canada has had they've had plans to let undocumented migrants stay in Canada to be examined by PM. That's the title of the report. But what's happening is even in the mandate letter that IRCC, the Prime Minister of Canada. Who was the Prime Minister of Canada again? Justin Trudeau, when he had issued a mandate letter to Sean Fraser, when Sean Fraser was appointed as the immigration minister, there was one of the mandates was that they were going to figure out a way to regularize a pathway for the undocumented workers in Canada. Now, as per the last report or the number, it stated that there are nearly 500,000 people in Canada who are undocumented. Now, what does undocumented mean? Now, undocumented is a very polite term to call some who are otherwise illegals. When we say illegals, so these are the people who have come to Canada. Now, they had filed for refugee claims, but their claims were denied. They were asked to leave Canada. They were asked to be removed from Canada, and somehow they did not leave. You came to Canada on a visit visa and you decided not to go. When you stayed put, you came to Canada on a work permit or a study permit. Your work permit or a study permit has expired, and now you don't want to leave. You don't want to go. So these are the different segments of people who might be in Canada as undocumented. Now, there are several schools of thought as to why this is a good option or this is not so good option. But what, in my opinion, it does is whether we like it or not. And yes, some candidates, some individuals may really need this program because they might be living in Canada. Even, for example, they were genuine refugee claimant, genuine asylum claimant. And because of the lack of documentation or lack of proper explanation, their claims were refused and they just could not get. And they genuinely may have a reason, or they might be running away from persecution, or they might be having some serious issues in terms of abuse if they were to go back. Yes, but do we really have 500,000 of such kind of people? It's something very hard to believe, given the way Canada is. But there have been lots of organizations who have been asking for this, and I guess Mark Miller is preparing a plan for discussion by cabinet before Parliament breaks for its summer recess within weeks. So this is coming up for the cabinet discussion as it says, almost as early as next week. We got to wait and see how this actually comes about. And they say that they might have some very serious number of people who are already in Canada who are undergoing some very different issues, and if they were asked to leave, then they probably they will not be in a good state of, they will not be in a good aspect of the way they can of life that they can go back to. But what would this do for people who are already in Canada? Does this not then encourage? So let's say for now, if Canada does allow the undocumented workers and offers them a pathway to become permanent resident, then what happens? All these people who are now protesting because they want extensions of their work permit, doesn't it sort of not bear very well on them? Because they are the ones who are protesting. They are the ones who came to Canada legally. They are paying taxes. They've paid heavily for their education in Canada, etc., etc., etc. And yet they are now not being able to get a pathway. And yet Canada is looking to offer a pathway to people who are otherwise illegal in Canada. So there is always two sides of the coin, and while we can always argue and debate whether this is right or this is wrong, what kind of a message does it send out to the rest of the people? That is something which Canada has to be quite careful about. Yes, Canada has always been at the forefront of humanitarian gestures across the world, but if there are 500,000 people in Canada today who are undocumented, and if you are going to offer a pathway for permanent residence and then citizenship, you have to be very, very careful as to what are the conditions around those pathways, because it may Now, that could be the fallout from such kind of a step. It may then encourage more people who are in Canada to just become undocumented. And if they have provided one amnesty once, probably they will do it again. And probably this will then become an option that people can opt for. But is that what Canada really wants to do? Create a larger number of undocumented workers or illegals in Canada? But that is something which they will have to really be careful about. And let's wait and see how this one comes out. And I'll share with you more details when they happen. But yes, at this point of time, this continues to be an issue. Guys, I have been saying from the beginning, please do not do super chats. I am not in a position to answer your questions today, and yet some of you have done it. And I hate to disappoint you, but I just cannot do those questions today. I'm quite late for my consultations today, and I was just doing this live stream only for the reason because yesterday was Saturday. I would have done it otherwise. I would have, taken on these questions again yesterday, but I was traveling because I was coming back from Halifax, and now being a Sunday, just need to get on with some other chores. So thank you for joining in. I really appreciate it. By all means, if obviously I haven't answered any of your questions, and for people who have done super chats, by all means, please do post your questions in the comments under the video, and I will most certainly come back and respond to those questions. Thank you so much for joining in. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time again.